Hi, y'all. Welcome. Moon Griffon Show. Great to have you with us. 844-766-6607. Hickson has a hotline. By the way, the name of the coach that was the winning coach in the Super Bowl, his name is Doug Peterson.
Yeah.
And he went to ULM, Brand. I just wanted to let you know he coached at ULM, and he coached at Calvary Baptist. I'll tell you what, last night, before we get to my special guest, from Monroe to Shreveport, where he is as well known as anywhere, people were lit up with pride because Doug was the guy. Doug's the guy. I know him. A lot of people claim. Everybody claims they know him now. He's Super Bowl coach. But the fact of the matter is, people that like Doug Peterson before he was an ever NFL football coach. And it's a quality man, a quality family. And whether you watch the Super Bowl or not, actually, Brandon, I would not have watched it, but I was pulling for Doug Peterson. Doug Peterson would have been the coach for the Detroit Lions. I'd have been a Detroit Lion fan last night. Yeah. But the quality of the person is what we're proud of. Yeah, he was a ULM guy and all that stuff, and North Monroe Baptist Church guy, Calvary Baptist. I mean, great Christian guy, but a great person. Him and his wife, Jeannie, beautiful kids. His parents go to church in North Monroe. I'm just happy for Doug Peterson. I really am. All other sidelines in the football and all that's all good, but it could not happen to a better guy and a nicer guy. And by the way, Brandon, they took a lot of shots at him when Philadelphia hired him. They had 7 new coaches that year, and they put him as the last one. As you know, the other 7 were way better hires than him. And sometimes, perseverance and stuff like that is a big thing. And they went through a lot of it. And he won it with a backup quarterback. So I don't care if you're a Philadelphia fan or not. Your boy down here that's a Dallas Cowboy fan, he was pulling for Brady and them. Yeah. I don't dislike Brady. Like the LSU people don't dislike Saban. I don't dislike Saban. I like watching great people, but I am happy for Doug Peterson. And he just happens to coach the Philadelphia Eagles. But great guy, great man of God, and his wife, they're just great people. We've had him on the program many times. He does a golf tournament. We did some things years ago when I was in Monroe, but what a good person. And a lot of people know him, Brandon, because they know him for Doug Peterson. Not Doug Peterson, the football coach. They know him as Doug Peterson, a great guy. And if you talk to if I had somebody from my church, my old church that would call in and knew him, was in Sunday school, they would tell you, down to earth, just good people. And that's what I'm happy for, is Doug Peterson. All right, we're going to move on, folks, but congratulations to Philadelphia and to Doug Peterson. Like I said, I watched Doug, and I'm like everybody else that knew him or that knows him. I know him as a great person. All right, we're going to jump gears. As you know, we've been going back and forth and budgets and all that stuff, and I have brought in a gentleman who used to be a legislator. I don't know if he's recovering. I think he is, though. Brett Geymann joins us. Brett, how you doing?
I'm doing good, Moon. I'm still in recovery mode, no question.
You need to team up.
Hey,
with
that's a great.
You need to read Ron Gomez's. He's a recovering legislator. Maybe you get a kick out of reading that. And
I probably would. But hey, back to your story. That's a great story about a Louisiana guy from ULM and willing to share his Christian faith and be proud of that, especially at a moment like that. It's great. It really makes you feel good about things, for a change, doesn't it?
Well, what happens is a lot of times they say good guys don't win. Good guy won this time. Now, by the way, a football team has a lot of to me, Brett, it's the most ultimate team sport in any of the sports. That's not to cut other team sports. I'm not cutting them. I'm telling you who's the best. You don't cut them. You don't cut the Patriots to make the Eagles look good. The Eagles are the best, but it's an ultimate. So you got to have all these coaches, trainers, doctors, staff, general managers. Then you got to have the players themselves, when you think about it. I mean, a quarterback can be good, but somebody's got to hike the ball to him, and somebody's got to block for him, and somebody's got to catch his passes.
Right.
You see what I'm saying? I mean, and running back can't run without the ball coming. I mean, it's an ultimate team game. We got a punting team. We got a punt-receive team. We got a kick team, kick-receive team. We got a defensive side of the ball. It's just a team deal, and the good Lord's put a good man to do that, and I'm just happy for the person, like you said. I'm going to give a little shout-out for ULM because, we've had some problems in the last few years. But he's a bright spot that came from that school, and a lot of bright spots, but he's a bright spot today.
Yeah, no question. And again, the fact that him and I think both of the quarterbacks are willing to share their faith publicly in that environment is just a great thing for all of us. And makes us proud, and being from ULM makes us proud, even though McNeese is still a better school.
Golly, I'm not touching that. I'm just not going to touch it.
I had to get that in.
I know. Look, since I'm probably going to hit you when you leave, I'm going to give you this one. All right. Anyway, okay. Brett Geymann is best. All right, Brett, I'll tell you what, it's amazing. And me and you've talked about this, and I've been talking about it for a while, the $600 million in cuts that the governor's claimed to cut. Now, by the way, Senator Sharon Hewitt is going to join us at 10:35. But I get amazed at this because the $600 million in cuts, Jay Darden, if you saw it, I'm sure you saw it. I mean, it's out there for everybody to see. Jay Darden admitted in August there's no $600 million cut. Actually, they upped it to $672 now. Then we find out, even in the press, now don't get me wrong, I don't think the press is turning against Bel Edwards, but they're all starting to write a few things now. And now we find out almost half of Bel Edwards' budgets are delayed bill payments. I mean, that's not a cut.
Agreed, and I think I view it this way, Moon. I think they boxed themselves in with that comment to begin with about the administration has made $600 million worth of cuts in an effort to show that they have tried to be fiscally responsible as they begin to roll out their agenda to increase taxes on the people. And I think they boxed themselves in, and when people started asking questions about, well, where are all these cuts? And you were one of the first because, as we all know, the budget has increased every single year in every single category, state and federal, and total spending, the whole basket is all increased. So the first thing we do is say, well, where are these cuts? And people begin to ask those questions, and now you're finding that some of those cuts are delayed payments that, by the way, in the end, they'll ultimately still have to pay them. It's just punting your rent check down 3 or 4 months down the line, you still have to pay it. Yeah. But, so you can say, hey, well, this month I did really good. Well, I didn't pay my rent or my car note or anything else, but, boy, things really look good on paper. So there have been no cuts, as you and I would describe them, a cut being less spending this year than the previous year. That has not been the case at all. In fact, the state budget has grown consistently year after year, despite what some people write in their articles, including the recent one in the Business Report.
Yeah, the one in the Business Report was really, really sad. I'm going to call a lady out as Stephanie Regal. I'm going to say is her name. Regal or Regal, however you want to say it. And she deals everything from the left. By the way, just a couple things she says. She acts like Bel Edwards inherited a budget of $2 billion, a deficit. Let's go back, Brett. You remember, I went back and pulled some old articles. I got them right here. Everybody was talking, even Bel Edwards, after the election, it was a $1.2 billion. And all of a sudden it grew to $2 billion. And I never did understand, because the press, the media came down here. And she blamed, by the way, Washington-style politics. I say Washington-style media has moved down here. They've got they've got their person in Bel Edwards, and the truth doesn't matter. And so I'm laughing at that. But it went from $800 million to $1 billion to 1.2 then to $2 billion. But nobody ever showed us how it went to $2 billion. Did you really think we had a $2 billion deficit?
Yeah. Well, and George W. Bush is not president anymore either. At some point, they have to quit blaming the previous administration. And you have said this numerous times, Moon, that John Bel Edwards, now the current governor, voted for many of the budgets that put us in that position of being at a $1.2 billion
six of eight budgets. 6 of 8 budgets.
So here we go. But the lady that wrote the article, which I do not know, she might be a nice lady and might be very talented, but this article is terrible. It's just ridiculous what she wrote. She's blaming the Republican members of the current legislature for all of the problems, because they first off, the Jindal administration punted them a $2 billion hole to begin with, which is not factual, but the Republican legislators have done nothing to try to fix it. That's basically her whole article is centered around that talking point, despite the fact that the governor has tried to stop every single effort of the Republican legislators to try to fix the problem. But, Moon, there's one thing that's missing that just drove me crazy all weekend as I read and thought about that article. She never mentions the taxpayer.
Nope.
And to me, the Republican members that are fighting for fiscal responsibility are representing us, the small business people and the taxpayers of the state, and we deserve to be in that conversation. She blames the Republicans for being obstructionist, Washington-style partisan hacks, and she never compliments them on taking a stand for the taxpayers of this state.
I don't believe the lady has a clue with reality. She says reality is a Louisiana budget situation, and then she gives us all no reality. No reality in an article whatsoever. Once again, I've said it because Edwards did not inherit the budget problems. He helped vote for it. Matter of fact, if you look at all of the major players, Robert Adley's out there running his mouth. Robert Adley voted for all 8 of Jindal's budgets. That's a fact. Okay, but he's out there talking about Republicans. John Alario voted for all 8 of the budgets. Now, I think you'd agree with me, Mr. Magician, Michael Jordan of the legislature, the leader of the whole thing, if he voted for all, why don't they ever bring his name up? But they never do. Here's something else. Last year, when they came out with this joint task force on what they ought to do. Okay, well, let's stop there, though. They're saying that the Republicans won't even take the task force. Well, last year, if you recall, Governor Edwards didn't listen to the task force. He came out with this thing called a CAT program. He poo-pooed the whole idea.
What 2 things, Moon, and you've mentioned them numerous times. Number one is the governor himself, did not take the advice of the task force, which many of the members on that are his people, and came out with this crazy cat tax, which has been a proven failure all over the entire country. That didn't go anywhere, as you know. But the second part of that, the task force never addressed the spending side of the reform process. And when you talk about tax reform and spending reform, or budget reform, you have to talk about the spending side of the equation. And the tax commission or task force or whatever it was came out with recommendations. Really, Moon, all they were trying to do was figure out how to generate enough revenue to continue the spending trend that we've been doing year after year. And by the way, we're spending way more than the economy can sustain, and we have the data to back that up.
Yeah, Brett Geymann, my special guest. Stephanie Regal's horrendous article in the Business Report we're talking about. By the way, Brett, when we get back, I got 3 or 4 more points that she doesn't have a clue. I don't even know if she covers this stuff. I don't know if maybe she does a better job of covering swamp tours. But anyway, we'll take a break. Be right back. Hello, welcome back. Moon Griffon Show. Great to have you with us. Mr. Brett Geymann, former representative, 12 years, is with us. And we're talking about budget stuff. And right now, particularly a horrible, horrible report out of the Baton Rouge Business Report by Stephanie Regal, who looks like she does not cover this stuff. It looks like somebody handed this to the information, say, look, put all this together, make us look good. That's what it looks like to me, Brett, because everything she's talking about, she's way, way off base. Let me give you an example I want you to touch upon. I got several of them here. But the growth has come from the federal side of the state budget only. Brett, the state budget, the state portion of the budget is up.
Correct.
So how can she say it's just the federal money that's coming up because of Medicaid, which is not true?
Look, again, when I saw the article online last week and I read it, I could not believe that somebody was actually putting that in print. It really looked like she came back from lunch with Jay Darden and wrote the article.
I tell you what I do. They love him in Baton Rouge. I mean, I've seen people write he's a genius and all that stuff, which is a bunch of bunk. That's exactly what's happening.
I don't have anything against Jay Darden at all, but he's not a fiscal hawk, which is what she says in the article. You have to laugh at somebody calling Jay Darden a fiscal hawk.
There's
nothing wrong with him being a moderate. There's nothing wrong with him believing the views that he has, and I respect that, but he's not a fiscal hawk. He's not a small government guy. And she writes the article and says in print that the state budget has not grown, and that is just not factual. Every piece of information that you have, that I have, that anyone who looks at this stuff in detail comes straight from fiscal staff. It's not biased. It's just here are all the numbers. The budget has grown at the state level and the federal level, both faster than the rate of the economy has grown, including your personal income. That's right, Moon. The government is spending money faster than your income is rising here in the state of Louisiana. And for her to print that, that's just not factual.
That's why I said she met with somebody. Somebody gave her the information. She put it in a column and sent it in. Ms. Regal is just bluntly not doing her job. Now, let me give you another. Go ahead.
Let me throw this real quick. She mentions and references comparing budget numbers from 2008. Everyone needs to understand and realize that in 2008, we were experiencing the greatest economic boom in many, many years because of the recovery money coming in from Rita and Katrina.
Correct.
People were rebuilding their homes, buying new washers and dryers and cars and you name it. And so in fact, I was in the legislature, Moon, and we had to have special sessions just to figure out how to spend all the money. Can you imagine that?
Yeah.
And that's what was going on. And they're using that year as the benchmark and saying, well, higher ed's been cut $700 million compared to 2008. That was the sugar high, Moon. You can't go to 2008 as the benchmark.
That's why I'm telling you, somebody walked in and told her what to say because Robert Adley's out there running his mouth about that. A deal last Friday. He brings up 2008. Jay Darden brings in a meeting the other day, brought up 2008. Edwards brings up 2008. Why? Because they've taken the highest mark possible, and they know we below that. And at one time, federal money and stuff is not coming in. It's a sham. And what bothers me is, if you remember, when Edwards came in, him and Darden said, we're not using fake numbers like Jindal and them did. Well, they're using more fake numbers than Jindal and them ever used.
Yeah, well, anytime you look at numbers, you look at a poll, you look at anything, you have to look inside the numbers to understand what they really mean. And you can't look at what this lady wrote in this article, in this publication, without looking at the numbers in depth. And you quickly find out that her numbers are half-truths, if you want to call it that. They're not wrong, but they're based on inaccurate data. And it's just it's a horrible article. It really goes after the Republicans who are trying to right-size government, to trying to make government live within its means. That's all they're trying to do, Moon. They don't hate people. They're not trying to close things down. These decisions are going to be painful, and nobody really wants to have to make them, but they're trying to do the right thing and get government on track with the economy so the taxpayers aren't hosed every year when they go back in session with more and more increases in taxes.
By the way, I read the last paragraph of the foolish article written by Stephanie Regal, and I challenge her anywhere in the country. She wants to go debate this. I'll go debate, just me and her, because all she's going to do is have talking points. She don't understand it. But to call Jay Darden a fiscal hawk is a joke. Jay Darden is the administrator. He's the administrator. He's the administrator. He's the one administrating these budgets. He's the one throwing out the false numbers. We got him on tape. Let's tell you, can you hold one more segment?
Sure.
I want to play Darden back in the day, which is last August, when he visited with Lance Harris in the committee. I'm going to let you listen to the whole thing. We're trying not to interrupt and get your comments. Why does he change his mind? Now it's a cut when it wasn't a cut back in August. Anyway, Brett Geymann, my special guest. We'll do at least one more segment. You're listening to the Moon Griffon Show. Hi, y'all. Welcome back, Moon Griffon Show. Great to have you with us. Brett Geymann, of course, a real fiscal hawk, and I like Jay Darden. It's amazing how they call people, Brett. Like I told you, I guarantee you, this lady, Stephanie Regal, doesn't have a clue, doesn't cover this stuff, wrote one article. And if she writes articles, she's getting the information from it. And anybody that want to call and tell I said that, she is more than welcome to come on here and let's discuss. I would go to Baton Rouge and the heart of the press club and debate this woman on any of this stuff because and I'm not a great debater. I would do it because she's wrong on so many instances, and nobody corrects them like we're doing today. Nobody in Baton Rouge is correcting what these people are putting out in this in the Morning Advocate. They're just not.
Moon, I don't even know what to say about the article. You're right. Somebody had to hand her an index card with, hey, there's 12 things I want you to print on, because it's not factual. She doesn't have in-depth knowledge of the budget process. She's not covering the story at all. Basically, she's attacking the GOP members who are trying to protect the taxpayers. I think she had one factual statement in that article that was accurate, and that is that a portion of the budget is constitutionally protected. And other than that, everything else it doesn't hold water. It's just not even true at all.
Yeah, no doubt about it. But Brett, how does it work? Brett Geymann, my special guest. Brett, how does it work? When Governor Edwards won, if you go back and look at the article, we were going to have an $800 million deficit. Then it went to $1.2 billion because people started writing about that. Then all of a sudden it was a $2 billion. How do they do that when they never showed how we get to $2 billion? They never showed that. By the way, I think the $2 billion number is bogus, and the reason I think it's bogus is one big reason. The press keeps putting it in there, and she did the same thing with the $2 billion. And everybody blames Jindal, of course, and that's fine. Jindal wasn't no expert by no means. But all these people on the Jim Big Lake Fannin, who's in the Senate, voted for every single one of the stinking budgets, but they blame the House Republicans.
Yeah, the blame is always on the good group of conservative legislators who are trying to protect the taxpayer, and they blow them up as obstructionist and right-wing nuts and hateful people and just all kind of name-calling, when all they're doing is trying to protect the very people who sent them there, the very people that pay the bills in the state. And we ought to be supporting them, Moon, but it's not $2 billion. I think the actual shortfall today, as I understand it, and I may be off a little bit, but somewhere around $750 to $800 million is a number that they need to come up with this year to make things work. And you do know, because you've said on your show, the federal tax law is going to the change in the law is going to generate somewhere around $250 million. Oil prices are up, estimated potentially around $100 million of new revenue that's coming in. So your number gets way smaller when you factor those two areas into the current budget shortfall. And just remember this. The lady that wrote the article said the Republicans have not offered one solution.
No, it's not
true. Last session, they said, let's don't spend $250 million of the forecasted amount of money that you have coming in. Let's hold back $250 million. That was the first number they tried to hold back, and then they compromised and went down and said, well, let's hold 150. Let's hold 100. Let's hold something. And they would not go along with that, Moon. And had they held back the $250 million, we really wouldn't even be talking about this today.
No doubt. All right, let me play this for you. This is the Jay Darden, and you'll recognize the voices, so I won't have to cut. When they get to send it to you, tell you what, Brandon, we'll play the first part of that. Jay, this is about 3 or 4 minutes, Brett, but I don't know if you heard it. I think you have, but I want you to listen to it again. Jay Darden talking about how we have no cuts. Now, by the way, he dug down last week and said, oh, no, they're real cuts. But if you listen to this, he'll tell you this wasn't real cuts. So let's start and play this, and we'll listen.
Let me also emphasize that, as we've done in previous years for long-standing practice as a state government, and certainly we did last year, as you'll recall, we will look first to means of financing swaps if they are available to avoid making the real cuts that will.
The Legislative Fiscal Office reported in March's Focus on the Fiscal newsletter exactly how much of the $617 million shortfall were real cuts to spending. The combined net reductions to state agency budgets from both mid-year deficit elimination plans totaled $106.9 million, or 17.3% of the total $616.8 million adjusted shortfall.
I have a real quick question. You had talked in your opening remarks about means of finance swaps. So I know last year in the mid-year deficit, we had a $332 million mid-year deficit. So most of that, the majority of that, was handled by means of finance swaps,
right.
Correct?
Correct.
So we only actually did, and your words were, the means of finance swaps, they keep us from having to do cuts, is what you said in your opening statement.
And if I did, that would keep us from doing state general fund reductions if we can find other monies that are in those budgets, particularly based upon closeout from the previous year that were carried forward. Those could substitute from actually making the state general fund cut. That's what I'm referencing.
Right. So a means of finance swap doesn't really reduce lay anybody off or anything like that.
That's correct.
Okay. So the year before, we had a $312 million adjustment we had to make last year. So 600 some odd million total, and I think the actual cuts there were 36 million. Everything else was handled by means of finance swap. So I guess my question is, when we're addressing the public and we say that we reduced or we cut the budget by 600 million, is probably not accurate when the majority of that is means of finance swap. Would you agree with that?
I would not have. I don't think I've used the phrase cut the budget.
I'm not saying you have, but I've heard some other people use it. That say we cut the budget $600 million, but actually the budget was only cut $36 million the prior year and $59 million last year. And actual cuts, according to what you started out saying today about means of finance swaps.
Joint Budget Committee testimony, January 22nd, 2018.
Senator, I have cut over $600 million state general fund in the 2 years I've been governor.
How could this be? The head of the Division of Administration, Darden, testified swaps don't reduce the general fund.
List of cuts that I'm happy to give you, all of state general fund dollars. and it adds up to more than $600 million.
I guess maybe my definition of a cut is different than yours. I mean, a $600 million cut, I would think, would be a difference, a reduction in state general fund dollars from one year to the next. And what I'm looking at is $8.7 billion in fiscal year 16, 9.1 in fiscal year 17, 9.4 in fiscal year 18 appropriated. I don't get the $600 million cut.
Well, I'll show you the list, and one of the things you're not taking into consideration are the required services that are imposed on us by law that we have to fund that go up every year. So if you, I mean, I can explain it to you. I can't understand it for you, and I'm not trying to be ugly about that. But it's more.
Insulting.
All right. Now, Brett, I'm sure you saw that, but I want you to concentrate on a couple of things. Jay Darden said, I didn't say nothing about, you didn't hear it come out of my mouth about budget cuts. And he admitted they were not real cuts. That was last August. Let me quote him. February 1st, this is the Advocate. You ready?
Ready.
Okay. Quote, Jay Darden, the cuts are real. Now, how are they not real in August, but they're real in February? I'm just asking. I'm just saying. Now, this guy, they build him up. You saw the article. They build him up as this great, great guy. How is it not real in August, but they're real now? Explain that to me.
I can't explain it, Moon, and it's just words on paper, and I think they realize, and I hate to say this in a bad way, but they realize that most people don't follow it in close, in-depth detail what's going on the budget process. So headlines matter to some degree, and I think they're just playing headlines. Senator Hewitt nailed it when she said most of us consider a cut being, less than this year, than year before, and so forth and so on. And that's what we all think of when we think about a cut. She was reading from the same information that you've seen and that I've seen, the real numbers that come from the fiscal division at the Capitol. They're not partisan. Here are the numbers, you analyze them, and you read right down the line. It tells you, here's what we spent this year, here's what we spent last year. And it has not been a cut. And she was only doing state general fund. She wasn't doing total state spending, which, by the way, has grown even higher.
Yeah.
And that's the whole point. There has been no reduction in state government. Yes, John Bel Edwards, the governor, is correct in that there are some mandated expenses that grow each year that we have to cover. That's not taxpayers' problem. Taxpayers want to know, how are you growing government in relation to the economy, and why do you keep coming back to me every year asking for more and more money? Something's got to give. And the Republican GOP members that are standing up for the taxpayer right now and being attacked by people writing these articles, that's just not fair. These guys are just trying to do the right thing and say, hey, the taxpayers really can't take any more. You're hitting the taxpayer harder than what the economy can sustain, and those numbers at some point just don't add up.
Yeah, by the way, the same article, Edwards says we have made some incredibly hard cuts. I mean, they dig down. Actually, they went from $600 million cut to $672 million now. I mean, this is really out there. Yeah, Doris Darden, in his own words, Mr. Expert, Mr. Fiscal Hawk, the guy that can't do no wrong in the press eye. And by the way, the governor said he had a list. They had no list. If he had a list, they would have brought it with him, number one. Number two, if they'd have had a list, they'd have had it out that day. They just sent out a list a week later. And the list is not cuts. I mean, even the press is getting it right. NOLA Times-Picayune, almost half of Bel Edwards' budget cuts are delayed bill payments. I mean, come on, how much more? I call it lying. I think this is disingenuous what Darden and Edwards and them are doing.
And Moon, delayed payments mean that you still have to pay them.
Sure.
You're not paying them this fiscal quarter or
let me ask you a question. This month. Let me ask you a question. You've seen this before. And by the way, I'm holding you for the full hour, so don't go away. And let me do this one last thing. You ever was watching a commercial in a car dealership at the end of the year, and maybe October or something like that, say, hey, if you buy your car now, make your first payment in January. Well, you look good. You get your car in October, November, December, and it's all cool because you're not paying no payments. But come January, you got to pay. Is that just like they saying here? Is that pretty close to what we're watching?
That's pretty good for you, Moon, a guy from ULM.
Brandon text me that.
Oh, you had some help. Okay, somebody gave you the index card. I get it. Good job, Brandon.
Actually, I came up with that all by myself.
Not bad for a ULM guy.
I'm telling you. Could be worse. I could be McNeese. But it's about the same thing. Hold your thought. Got a little bit more. Brett Geymann. I appreciate. I wasn't gonna hold Brett that long, but he's always intriguing, and I think he speaks the truth, and he's really sharing a lot of information with us. So we'll be back. Wrap up with Mr. Brett Geymann, who's a recovering legislator. Folks, we're telling the truth, but the people in the Washington-style press, like this lady right here, Miss Stephanie Regal, somebody's giving us some talking points. She writes it. I'd debate her any way she wants to. Day Darden would have to really prepare her. We've got to take a break. We'll be right back. Hi, y'all. Welcome back. Moon Griffon Show. Great to have you with us. 844-766-6607. Hickson has a hotline if you'd like to be part of the program. Brett Geymann, a recovering legislator. Of course, my special guest. Brett's been through these numbers and budget numbers and all this mess for a while. Brett, I take it. I had Lance Harris on a few times, and I asked Lance Harris about across-the-board budget cuts, and he said we could do. You could do a 3% across-the-board budget cut. Is that doable?
Well, you could. In theory, you could, but is it the best practical way to do it? The way our rules are set, and the answer that may be no. But yes, technically, you can say we're cutting every agency 3%, 7%, whatever, like Oklahoma did. The big problem with our budget is a lot of it is protected by the Constitution, and we can't necessarily cut those. We don't always have to fund the growth in those agencies, but we can't necessarily.
Well, but you could cut if you can cut the growth in them, like they tried to do last year. They will do all the mandatory stuff.
That's
$60-80 million.
Take the take the MFP, Moon, which is what funds K-12 education. We are mandated to fund them at a particular level, and each year there's a built-in growth into the MFP, and there have been many times that we have not been able to or chose not to fund the growth in the MFP, but it's very difficult to cut the MFP. The Constitution allows you a little bit of room. It's a couple of percent, I think, under a certain environment, and then the governor, under a certain environment can cut a couple of percent as well. But we're very limited in some of those things that we can cut.
Yeah, but
we certainly can.
Let's be blunt, though, and you were there, so you can answer the question. And this happened before you got there, and it's probably happened since you left. The reason we got all this dedication is they could never go spend the money on the things they wanted to spend the money on because the people demanded it. So we got dedication through the legislature. We got dedication through dedication through constitutional amendments. So when I hear legislators or people in the press cry about, well, everything's dedicated, there's a reason everything's dedicated. There's a reason, and it's not Moon's fault. I'm just saying, and as a taxpayer, it's the lawmaker's fault as much as it is anybody that we got all this stuff dedicated.
Agreed. The citizens of the state don't trust government to spend the money properly, so over time they have voted to put in the Constitution protections on certain things that they believe are important. K-12 is an example of one of those, and there are plenty of others. So yes, a lot of times people say, well, we ought to scrap the whole thing, and everybody ought to come to the table each year and justify their existence and make us believe that we ought to be funding them at that level. That, from a pure standpoint, I agree with that. But the reality is the people of the state have said no by the constitutional protections we have put in there. Those were all voted on and passed by the people of the state.
Yeah.
Either here nor there, the legislators are faced with this challenge. They have to make the budget work. We are required to balance our budget in the state of Louisiana every year, and they're going to have to work within the parameters that the Constitution allows them. We've been facing that forever. This is nothing new. So Lance is correct. The legislature could say, you know what, we're just cutting 10% across the board everywhere we can. They could certainly do that. That's one way. Or you can go to the...
I just think it's amazing. In the real world, I know you run a business or two. And I know because of oil and gas industry, one part of your business is taking a hit. Now, let's be blunt. I mean, I've had it happen to me. And you've had to cut back. And everybody in the oil and gas industry and the economy and stuff, they had to cut back. They've had to let people go or cut their salaries or cut what they're doing or cut a department out. It's not how state government works. They don't want to cut anything out. And let me go back to something you said on the task force. We talked about raising the revenue, but nobody wants to talk about challenge what we're wasting money on or what we can do better with spending. And there comes the problem. The bottom line is, you said this or Lance said this, the bottom line is we're spending way more money than we were, The budget is skyrocketed up by 5.4, 5.3 billion, depending on what numbers you look at. We've increased taxes by over $2 billion since Bel Edwards has been. That's some permanent, some temporary. And that's the bottom line. And, yeah, we are. Medicaid is breaking us. But nobody wants to talk about that either.
Moon, you're right on everything that you just said. The real numbers are this. The economy is growing at about 2.5. State spending is growing at about 4. In some cases, if you do just state general fund, it's growing over 3. Those numbers will not work over time. We're spending more money than the economy can sustain. The agencies do not come to the table ever, not one time, and say, ladies and gentlemen of the Appropriations Committee, I would like to propose to you that we reduce our budget X amount of dollars because we believe it's the right thing to do. That's never going to happen.
No.
So the legislature is going to have to, with the help of the executive branch, rein in these agencies because all they do now is come before the table and give you their wish list, and then the administration goes out and tries to fund it. They need to come to the table and say, this is the right amount of money that we need based on what the economy can sustain, and then let's go spend it in the best possible way that we can. It's what you do each and every day. It's what every business person does each and every day when they look at their budget within.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Brett Geymann, my special guest. And you're right on the money, but money has gone up. The facts are there. And that's what gets me frustrated when I read an article like Stephanie Regal, who's taking talking points from somebody, darting to somebody, and just writing it. And not really getting down to the deep. They're not doing their homework. They're not challenging anything. Although the press has challenged them on unemployment numbers, and they challenged them on this delay in bill payments. So they've been a little challenging. Not as much as I'd like, but at least a little bit.
No question. And all she was doing was attacking the very legislators over there who are actually trying to stand up and protect the taxpayers and include them in the discussion, by the way. That's all they're wanting is, hey, how about the taxpayers out there? Where do they fit? And anytime the conservative members do that, they get attacked by many in the media as being obstructionists, and that's not the case. I want everyone to know that. These guys are not obstructionists. They're there to try to do the right thing and make things work within the parameters that the economy can sustain, and that's all they're trying to do.
Yeah, I agree with you. They've actually, we voted for the Senate budget every time, yet they're blaming the House Republicans for everything that's gone wrong. All right, Brad, God bless. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Moon. See ya.
Senator Sharon Hewitt at 10:30. Don't go nowhere, folks. More to come. Hi, hello. Welcome back. Moon Griffon Show. Great to have you with us. 844-766-6607. Hickson has a hotline if you'd like to be part of the program. Your opportunity to be a voice, folks, as we rock and roll. All right, we're going to jump gears. Everybody talking about taxes and tax breaks, and are they real? Miss Kathy Morgan joins us, and she's a tax professional. Kathy, how you doing?
Good morning, Moon. How are you?
I am doing super. It's great to talk to you this morning. Everybody's running around talking about taxes. Let's do this first. Give us a little background of yourself.
Well, I've been a tax professional for over 25 years. I'm also a instructor and travel around the country when I'm not doing taxes up here in Bossier City and teach tax professionals continuing education.
So good. You're kind of a teacher, too, so they do hire you out to go do that. That's awesome.
Oh, yes, sir.
Well, let's talk about this. I mean, everybody, taxes. We talk about it a lot here. I got to tell you, I work in radio, so we get excited when minimum wage goes up. So
I understand.
So everybody in my listening audience will go, wow, what kind of break are you getting? So let's talk a little bit about what the president and Republicans have done and how this may affect people.
Well, with the federal tax breaks, pretty much everybody is going to get at least some relief from taxes. They're either going to have a smaller tax liability next year, or they're going to have more credits, especially the people in our state because we are in the lower income, when you compare us to one of the coasts, the left coast or the east coast,
sure.
Whichever. So a lot of those cuts are going to affect our people because most of our tax payers in this state have a couple of kids. The child tax credit has gone up. There's a new credit for non-child dependents on the return, those kinds of things.
Yeah. Now I am getting from people. I am getting from people that are already saying they got X amount of dollars already in their paycheck. Matter of fact, we've heard from people that have gotten pay raises because of the tax cut. But we've also heard from people that have gotten they're seeing more money in their paycheck, and that's exciting to me. I'm tickled to death for them.
It is, but what they need to be wary of is not to be expecting, because more in your paycheck doesn't mean you're going to get more at the end of the year in your refund as well, because you're getting that throughout the year in your paycheck. Their taxes are going to go down, but they may not necessarily see a big, huge jump in their refund because they're getting it in their paycheck every payday.
Yeah.
So
I understand.
There's a lot of misconceptions out there about that they're going to see this raise in their paycheck, and then they're going to see a big, huge jump in their refund next year.
Mm-hmm. So are you telling me next year in the refunds is where some people are going to see a big part of that?
Yes, people who either changed their withholding or who are in a tax situation where their income may be either periodic or it may fluctuate from paycheck to paycheck, they may see the bigger refund at the end of the year because of the credits. Because the credits aren't included in the extra withholding, the things like the child tax credit having doubled and those kinds of things.
Well, then, so what you're telling me is people that itemize it all are going to see some more breaks when they look at now. When you say next year, we're talking about in 2019, correct?
Right. We're talking this time next year when people are filing their 2018 returns. But that's not necessarily to do with itemizing. As a matter of fact, there are going to be a whole lot fewer people that are going to be able to itemize because of the increase in the standard deduction.
Mm-hmm.
The standard deduction is basically doubling for all of the tax brackets. Not quite double, but almost. For all of the tax brackets, but some of the things that can be taken, like if you are a W-2 employee and you took a lot of business expenses on your itemized deductions, those have gone away altogether.
Yeah.
So for people who are like W-2 employees who are truck drivers or outside salespeople and use a lot of mileage and that kind of thing, they're going to get hurt because those itemized deductions, that part of the itemized deductions have gone away.
Okay. Well, I guess for every person, they'll find out really about most of the tax cuts in a year.
Well, yeah, and if they're using a tax professional, most of the tax professionals have got things in place right now where they can at least give them an estimate of how it's going to affect, kind of a side-by-side comparison. If everything was the same next year as this year, this is what your taxes would look like.
Yeah. Kathy Morgan, my special guest, master tax advisor, talking a little bit about the Trump and basically Trump and Republican tax cut that they just got. Will people be able to this is going to be a question that I think you'll be able to answer it. You may not, because I don't know who all you deal with. But will most people be able to tell they got a break and it's been good for them? Will they be able to tell? Because I think the key is now when people are calling me saying, I got back $80 more a pay period, I've heard people say they've gotten $300 back between them and their spouse. I had one told me they got $550 more money to spend per month between the two spouses.
Oh, absolutely, and they're going to be getting that throughout the year unless they change their withholding. Because what happened is the IRS said nobody changes their withholding. We're not doing any new withholding documents, but these are the new tables to base the withholding on. So that's where people are getting the additional money.
Okay. So,
but unfortunately, it's going to have the reverse effect in Louisiana.
Mm-hmm. Well, let me ask this question. Let's move on to the business tax cut, the corporate tax cut going from 35 to 21. Now, I got to believe that's gigantic, and that's because we've seen companies all over the country. There was a bank recently here, Brandon. I think y'all had it on the news. Iberia Bank said they were giving bonuses, and pay raises directly related, and it's a corporation directly related to the tax cut. Is that going to be a great thing for employees? I guess that's what I'm asking.
Oh, absolutely, because the not only are the all of the corporations doing those kinds of things, and I think we will see more of that next year after the first year the corporations actually get affected by the lower taxes. They're going to go, oh, this is real. And we'll see more of that this time next year. But it also has a trickle-down effect, as you mentioned. But also there's another new tax break for qualified business income for the small businesses, the S corporations and the partnerships and the sole proprietors that goes on their personal return, that it could be a really nice break depending upon individual circumstances. There are a lot of mechanics to that, but I think it's going to be a very nice little bonus for some of our smaller business people who get their income from their business through pass-throughs like K-1s on corporations and partnerships, or who are sole proprietors.
I'm talking to Miss Kathy Morgan, Master Tax Advisor. She's out of Bossier City, Shreveport area. Kathy, and I hate to even ask this question because I like to stay upbeat on this because I think a tax break giving people back money is a good thing. Any losers in this as far as the taxpayers? Do you see anybody that actually loses and goes, my God, this has really hurt me?
On the federal end, no, not really. There are some people who are going to obviously benefit more than others, but I don't really see a whole lot of losers there. The ones that people are throwing up there on the news are, well, this guy's going to lose. He has 5 kids, and he's going to lose all those personal exemptions. Well, yeah, he has 5 kids, and between his standard deduction and doubling all of those credits, he's still going to get $8,000 back. So I don't see a whole lot of that. There may be some specific individuals.
Sure, yeah, situations,
but
I understand.
The broad stroke, no.
Okay, let me ask this then. I read this on TV. Of course, the Democrats, nobody voted to give people back some of their money, okay? And I don't want to bring you into politics as much, but I want to ask the question because they kept saying this is only a cut for the rich, only cut for the rich. And I'm a little puzzled by that because the people that get in touch with me are working class people like me and my wife.
I agree completely.
This is not a rich tax cut.
I mean, the proportionally people in higher brackets are going to get a higher cut. But proportionally, they pay more of the taxes than the people in lower brackets.
You see, that's what they don't say if they're political. When we're talking politics now, they don't ever say that. If I'm making money and I'm paying $10,000 in taxes and Brandon's paying $1,000 in taxes, and you do a tax break, and Brandon gets back $200 and I get back $2,000. Brandon goes, well, my God, why did you get back a lot more than me? Well, Brandon, I paid $8,000 more in taxes. You're gonna pay $800. You know what I'm saying? They're not. When you see the politics and the rhetoric and people down in Rush calls them low information voters, they don't understand that and they don't want to understand it because that's pretty simple to me. I'm paying $10,000. Brandon's paying $1,000. We get a 20% break. Brandon's gonna pay $800. I'm still paying $8,000. I mean, I'm still paying $8,000, but my break was bigger because I've been paying a lot more than him.
Right. You're still paying 10 times as much as Brandon.
Yep. 10 times more, and they'll tell me I'm rich and I'm getting a bigger break.
Absolutely.
Yeah, unbelievable. All right, Miss Kathy, if people want to get in touch with you, what's the best way to get in touch with you? Because I know you do a lot of stuff with the National Association of Tax Professionals and things that you do.
I'd rather not give out my personal information online, but they can look on NAEA, National Association of Enrolled Agents.org, NAEA.org, and they can search for a tax professional, or they can look on NATP, National Association of Tax Professionals.com, and search for a tax professional, and they'll find great tax pros in their areas on both of those, and I'm on both of those.
Okay. Well, I sure do appreciate it, Miss Kathy. Kathy Morgan, tax professional. Thank you for the info you shared with us today.
Thank you.
All right, we'll do it again. All right. Got to take a break. More to come. Don't forget Senator Sharon Hewitt at the bottom of the hour. And a lot more to come in between with a short segment. And I got to fill in a lot of stuff in that short segment. Brandon's going, I know you are. All right, we'll be right back. To be a voice. We're going to jump gears somewhat. Somebody I've come to know a little bit, and I enjoy her tenacity, and I enjoy her fighting the good fight. Senator Hewitt joins us. And, of course, Senator Hewitt, how you doing?
I'm doing great this morning, Moon. How are you?
Doing great. Well, you could have been listening early in the program. We took the part out what Bel Edwards did when he talked to you and said, I can explain it, but I can't understand it for it. And we're kind of using that now. We're going to use that as our motto every time we have to address the pro-Edwards press. That's all over the state of Louisiana because we're explaining it to them, and it's because they don't want to understand it, Senator Hewitt, and it's very frustrating to watch what was written like in the business report, Stephanie Regal. I don't know if she covers the legislature at all, but I know this. She took talking points from Jay Darden and them because everything they write, Jim Beam, Tyler Bridges, they all write the same stuff. They all blame the Republicans, and they blame everybody. They blame the budget on they inherited $2 billion worth of budget. And by the way, that's what I wanted to bring up first. I remember when Edwards won, Governor Edwards won, the budget was less than $1 billion. Then it went to $1.2 billion, and before you know it was $2 billion. Did y'all ever get any numbers showing how it went from $850 million to $2 billion overnight, and nobody ever knew? But the press, the pro-Edwards press, been running with that since day one.
Well, that's one of the challenges, I think, with this administration is we can't ever get a handle on the numbers.
Well, can I stop you right there a second?
It's a moving target.
Let me stop there, because that's the same thing that Edwards and Darden and the press said about Jindal. They don't use good numbers. They didn't use real numbers. Now, these people are using bogus and false numbers and numbers they get no telling from where, but that's the same thing they accuse Jindal of.
Well, it is in many ways, and one of the problems that we have is agreeing on what's the definition of a deficit or what's the definition of a cut. And in some cases, what I believe the current administration is doing is they'll take their wish list of things that they would like to have funded, and when we don't fund them all, they call that a cut, or they'll define that as a deficit, when in fact the way you and I would define a cut, and I believe the people of Louisiana would define a cut, is when you're spending less money today than you did last year or the year before that.
Yeah, and I know, and that's what you were trying to get out when Governor Edwards was so negative to you. You were trying to talk about the $600 million. Now, I think it's pretty interesting. The governor said you had that he cut $600 million. By the way, he's upped that to $672 million now. And you were promised to get a list. Did you? And I noticed they sent a list out, but the list is going back and harming them because $300 million plus was Medicaid funding that they're going to replenish anyway. Even the Times Picayune said almost half of Edwards' budget cuts are delayed bill payments.
Well, that's exactly right. You know, they spent a week working on the list that supposedly the governor said in testimony he had back in his office. But they spent a week working on the list. They sent it out and finally got it, I think, like at 10 o'clock one night. During the Trump presentation, the Trump State of the Union, it's kind of ironic, and our staff went to work and looking at the numbers that were quoted in that, and within about 24 hours found quite a few holes in what the administration put out. And just as you said, many of the cuts weren't really cuts. They were double counts. They were deferred payments. And, again, it doesn't bode well for a special session when we can't even get a handle on any of the numbers. And I think the administration is kind of losing credibility here.
I have noticed some of the press, when they put the numbers out and bragged that unemployment was down, Tyler Bridges, of all the people who've been a pro-Edwards guy, I call him his press secretary, actually challenged them on the numbers, that we didn't have growth here. We had about the same number of jobs when he came in. And then we had professionals, Richardson and some other people said, well, the reason we have unemployment rate that's low is because 50,000 people quit looking. And on the flip side, you had people moving out the state again, our migration. So, they really, then this, almost half of Bel Edwards' budget cuts are delayed bill payments. A delayed bill payment is not a cut. He claims it's a cut. That's not a cut because you're going to put the money back in and pay for it.
Well, that's right, and it actually was the same. He was claiming the same payment that got pushed from one year to the next. And so every time it got pushed, he claimed that as another cut. And so, I don't think people in Louisiana think of it like that. A cut is when you're not actually spending something and it's forever gone. And, those are not cuts. Those are not real cuts. And we are growing government right now to the tune of $1 billion. It will have grown by 12% since this governor took office if we give him the revenue now that he's asking for in this upcoming session.
Oh, no doubt about it. The growth has been there. Senator Sharon Hewitt, my special guest. Senator Hewitt, I'm glad you brought up the point. We played it today. I had Brett Geymann on earlier, and Brett made the point. We played the governor saying what he said about the $600 million cut, and he said we have a list. We got a list. He told you we have a list. You did a great job of questioning him, and then a week later, you should have gotten the list. Like he could have used his cell phone and texted somebody and say, hey, send the list to Hewitt. But bottom line is, Senator, they didn't have a list. They didn't have a list. It took them a week to get a list out because there was no list. Then we find out the list has got things in it that have been double counted.
Well, again, it's very discouraging. And, the governor continues to kind of pound on the legislature about wanting us to go into a special session and address this fiscal cliff. Well, nobody can even agree on what the numbers are. And so how can you address any kind of a cliff when you can't define what the cliff is? I think what our constituents want is they want to know that we're spending all the money wisely. And we have not gotten to the point yet where we can say that. So I think we need to work on our expenses. We need real budget reform. We need real cuts. And this governor doesn't seem to want to do that.
No, great point. Senator Sharon Hewitt, my special guest. No, Senator Hewitt, I think you're right on the money. I want to go back to what you said, too. You mentioned numbers. Now, I watched this for a long time, as you know. I've been doing this for 25 years. And they pounded Jindal and his team for not producing real numbers. So when you brought up the fact to me that we want to know what the numbers are, we can't get the numbers, that tells you they're playing with numbers to benefit themselves. You're trying to do something that's right and to change things, and you can't do it unless you get real numbers. Well, the $2 billion deficit, when he got elected, it was $800 million. It went to $1.2 billion. All of a sudden, out the blue, we're $2 billion in the hole. That was out the blue. We're $2 billion in the hole. And where did that number come from? Because did y'all have those numbers, or did that just come out of the governor's mouth? And of course, the Pro Edwards press ran with that.
Right. Well, again, it goes back to that definition of a quote, a deficit. This administration defines a deficit by saying, what are all the things that we'd like to have? For example, in this current budget, they have added $260 million of new expenses that they would like to fund. Just $260 million of additional things.
Out the blue.
Out the blue. So now that becomes part of the deficit. That's part of your discussion in the deficit because he gets to define, I guess, what he believes the deficit is.
But see, Senator, you made my point. He's getting to define what the deficit is because y'all don't have numbers to know if he's right or not. Yet they tell us, well, Bobby Jindal and them use bad numbers. You won't have that from this office. And the fact is they are using wrong numbers. We don't know if they're using the truth or not. How do we know? Because even legislators and senators like yourself don't know where they're getting the numbers from.
Well, it is very difficult to follow for sure. And then when you have interagency transfers and you're moving money from one agency and one department to the next, it makes it very difficult. And, I think that this governor's objective is to grow government and to raise revenue to do that. And I don't support that philosophy. I know the Acadiana delegation does not support that philosophy. They wrote a letter recently that I read in the St. Mary News where they talked about their ideas on budget reform and things that they've already done and votes they've already taken to try to rein in the out-of-control government spending. And that's what we need to do. We can't just keep passing taxes and growing government.
Yeah, well, I agree with you. Let's take a break. Senator Sharon Hewitt, my special guest. If you have a question for us, you don't mind asking it. 844-766-6607. Hickson has a hotline. We'll be right back. 844-766-6607. Hickson has a hotline. Senator Sharon Hewitt, my special guest. And we're going to, Sharon, you mind taking a few phone calls?
Sure.
Okay. I didn't tell you that as part of the gig, but I'll take a couple calls. But I've heard you before, and Brandon, I don't know who you're putting up first. I heard you before, and I think if you can handle them. Hey, if you can handle the governor, you can handle anybody. Let's go to Al.
Let's see if I can understand it or explain it.
That's right. Well, I know you understand it. I bet you can explain it. Alvin and Hathaway, question or comment? I'm sorry. Mike on the road. Mike, question or comment?
Good morning, Moon, and good morning, Senator Hewitt. And it's a sad state of affairs when a woman has to take a man's job in the Senate and to face these people. But I have a question for you. Why can't you put him under oath, make him show under oath where he's cut all of this money, and if he can't show it, impeach him?
Well, Mike, thank you for that question. First of all, I'm not sure that it's a sad state of affairs. I think women can hold our own in any of these discussions, and I look forward to continuing to add value to the discussion on the state's budget. The governor and anyone that testifies before the Senate Finance Committee or any committee meeting is actually under oath. And if they willfully say things that are not correct and testify to things that willfully are not correct, they can be held for perjury. And so I do not believe that that's what the governor has done, though. I do think that, he has spoken about things as he understood them, and that perhaps he needs to get better support from his staff to better represent the data.
All righty. Let's move on, Brandon, if we can. Let's get one more. Let's go to Alvin and Hathaway, question and comment with Senator Sharon Hewitt.
Hey, thanks for taking my call, Moon. I'm not here to blame anybody for anything. A simple question. If the senator could print a list of the NGOs that are being paid from our tax dollars and show what kind of cuts they've received in this budget. And I'll just hang up and y'all can discuss it. But
all right, Senator Hewitt, it's been a big deal. I know when my good friend C.B. Ferguson was listening, still here, he used to talk a lot about NGOs and money that went to non-governmental organizations. We think that's still taking place in a big-time way. Can something be done with that? Has anything been done about that, or has that been changed to another department?
Well, it's all part of the budget, and I do think there is still some funding going to NGOs. I don't think it's a significant part of the budget, but that's certainly they are line items in the budget that we look at every year.
All right, Sharon. Senator Hewitt, go ahead.
So I was just saying we do, I think, have some funding for NGOs in the budget. I don't think it's a significant amount of money, but they do request funding every year, and that has to be appropriated by the legislature. So I'll keep a special eye on that and be able to talk about that after we get the
Sure.
details of the new budget.
Well, I know that NGOs, a lot of time legislators and all that stuff, they get NGOs and do stuff, but really when you think about non-government organizations, they should never have a penny from state government. That's what always bothers. I know it bothers CB to no end. It started bothering me as he explained to it, because that may be part of the budget problem. We got stuff that's not state functions. It looks like to us the state budget ought to go to state functions.
Well, I agree with you, and there's a lot of discussion about that right now. We also spend a significant amount of state budget funds for local government use.
Sure.
So we send, for example, we have a line item in the budget that's $90 million that we send back to local governments. And there's certainly a lot of capital outlay funds that support projects in local government. And so I think those are all things that are worth discussing. Because at a time when our funding is limited, I'm not sure that we can continue to do that.
Yeah, it's just checking everything out, I guess, is what people are trying to. That's why people bring up NGOs. They're just trying to see if, trying to see what else could be. Talk about cuts. if somebody is, like the example, they funded a state's funded a sidewalk in Balkanville. That's probably the people in Balkanville that should take care of that. Not necessarily state government. And we kind of wonder sometime if we're doing too much of that.
Well, I think those are all really good questions, and many of my colleagues have been asking those questions as well. So I think all of those funding requests are going to start getting a lot more scrutiny, and it's just difficult. The budget is so complicated, and what we've done over the years when things weren't working quite well is we've just sort of Band-Aided over them, and rather than really kind of starting with a clean slate, which is why many people are calling for a constitutional convention. It gives you an opportunity to kind of wipe the slate clean in a particular area and to do things that make sense instead of, having, for example, like a high tax rate and then trying to put a bunch of exclusions, exemptions, and exceptions in place. Maybe it's better just to have a lower tax rate and none of the exemptions. And so there's things like that we could do if there was the will of the legislature to do that.
Sure, no doubt about it. It's going to be interesting to see. Now, real quick, I'm reading a little bit about Speaker of the House, Barra, talking to the governor about a special session. Do you see a special session before the regular session? It looks like it's going to be a special session. I know the governor said he wasn't going to call when he wasn't going to call when they've been back and forth. Do you think a special session will happen?
I don't know, Moon. That's kind of the billion-dollar question. I personally don't think there's any value in having a special session beforehand because we don't know what the numbers are. And I think that we need to start on the expense side of the equation. We need to decide what it is that we want to fund, what's appropriate for state government to fund, what's the appropriate level of funding, and then determine if there are any gaps. We still can't get the administration to give us a solid number on how the federal tax reforms are going to impact the state's budget. Mm-hmm. There are a number of moving targets that we still don't have answers for, so I personally think it's premature to go into a special session and start raising a bunch of revenue when we really don't know how much, if any, revenue we need.
Yeah, good point. And by the way, you mentioned numbers. When are you going to get numbers? How do you get numbers? Who's sending you the numbers? When will y'all see any numbers at all that the governor and them already know about?
Well, that's the administration's responsibility. And, we will get more numbers through testimony from the state agencies about their specific budgets. And, it'll be our job then to make decisions based on that. So It's a very convoluted process. It is frustrating when there's so many numbers floating around and many of them aren't correct.
Yeah, and that bothers me because they made it sound like that's what they did in the general administration, but they wouldn't do it in this administration. The fact is they are doing it. I got to go. Listen, it's always a pleasure. We'll do it again. Send it to you. Thank you so much.
My pleasure, man. Thank you.
Hey, and by the way, hold on, because I got to give you a message from somebody that's wanting you to call them. If you'll hold on, we'll talk to you off there.
Okay.
Thank you, ma'am.